Single mother and her 3 young sons vanished from their Montana Prairie campsite in 2009, breakfast still cooking on the stove, but all 4 family members were gone without any trace. But 4 years later, in 2013, what a tornado researcher found floating in midair inside an abandoned grain silo changed everything investigators thought they knew about this case. Lisa Chen had always believed that the best education happened outside classroom walls. As a dedicated homeschool mother to 3 energetic boys, she'd made it her mission to teach them about the natural world through direct experience rather than textbooks. Her sons, 9-year-old Marcus, 7-year-old Tyler, and 5-year-old Jamie, were her whole world. After her husband died in a car accident 3 years earlier, Lisa had thrown herself into providing the boys with adventures that would honor their father's memory while giving them the kind of childhood he would have wanted for them. "Dad would have loved this trip," Marcus said as they drove across the vast Montana prairie in early June 2009, heading toward a remote campsite Lisa had discovered through homeschool networks. The location was perfect, miles from civilization, with endless grasslands where the boys could explore safely while learning about prairie ecosystems. Tyler pressed his face to the window, watching the endless expanse of grass rolling past. "It looks like the ocean, but made of grass," he observed with the wonder that made Lisa's heart swell with pride. Little Jamie, still young enough to need afternoon naps, was excited about sleeping in a tent. "Will we see buffalo, Mama?" he asked, clutching his favorite stuffed animal, a small brown bear he'd named Coco after his favorite bedtime drink. "Maybe," Lisa smiled, though she knew the chances were slim. "But we'll definitely see prairie dogs, and maybe some antelope, and the stars out here are going to be amazing." The campsite Lisa had chosen was on private land owned by a family friend, situated near an abandoned homestead from the early 1900s. The old farmhouse had long since collapsed, but the grain silo still stood as a lonely sentinel against the enormous Montana sky. They arrived just before sunset, and the boys immediately fell in love with the vast openness of the prairie. There were no trees for hundreds of yards in any direction, just rolling grassland that seemed to stretch to the edge of the world. "Can we explore the old buildings?" Marcus asked, pointing toward the grain silo that loomed about a quarter-mile from their chosen campsite. "Tomorrow," Lisa promised. "After we set up camp properly and I can go with you. Those old structures can be dangerous." That evening was perfect. They cooked dinner over their camp stove while watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and orange. Lisa used the opportunity to teach the boys about prairie ecology, showing them different types of grass and explaining how this ecosystem had once supported vast herds of buffalo. "Native Americans lived here for thousands of years," she explained as they sat around their small campfire. "They understood how to live with the land instead of trying to change it." Tyler found this fascinating. "Did they live in teepees right here where we're camping?" "Very likely," Lisa nodded. "This whole area was part of their seasonal hunting grounds." As darkness fell, the boys were amazed by the stars. Without any light pollution, the Milky Way blazed across the sky like a river of diamonds. Jamie fell asleep in Lisa's lap while she pointed out constellations to the older boys. "I love homeschool camping trips," Marcus said sleepily as Lisa tucked him into his sleeping bag. "This is the best classroom ever." "Your dad would be so proud of you boys," Lisa whispered, kissing each of them goodnight. "Sweet dreams." She stayed up a bit longer, enjoying the profound silence of the prairie and planning the next day's educational activities. They would explore the old homestead, collect prairie grass samples, and maybe hike to a nearby creek she'd spotted on her maps. Lisa finally went to sleep around midnight, confident that tomorrow would be another perfect day of learning and adventure. But when morning came, everything changed. The first sign something was wrong came from other campers, a family with teenagers who were camping about 2 miles away. They had driven over to check on the Chen family after seeing smoke still rising from their campsite well past noon. What they found defied explanation. The camp stove was still burning, with a pot of oatmeal bubbling away, now burned black and filling the air with acrid smoke. 4 bowls were set out on the picnic table, along with spoons and cups of orange juice that had grown warm in the morning sun. But Lisa and her 3 sons were nowhere to be found. Their tent was still zipped shut, with sleeping bags neatly arranged inside. Lisa's purse sat on the picnic table next to the breakfast setup. The boys' shoes were lined up outside the tent, exactly where they'd left them the night before. But the family had vanished completely. The other campers immediately called 911 on their satellite phone. Within hours, the remote Prairie campsite was swarming with search and rescue teams, sheriff's deputies, and FBI agents. Detective Sarah Martinez led the investigation. A 15-year veteran of missing persons cases, she'd worked dozens of family disappearances, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. A mother doesn't just walk away from breakfast, she's actively cooking, Detective Martinez told her team. And 3 young boys don't leave camp without their shoes. Something happened here. The scene was preserved exactly as the other campers had found it. The oatmeal was still bubbling when the first responders arrived, suggesting that whatever had happened to the Chen family had occurred very recently, probably within the last hour. But there were no signs of struggle, no indication of foul play, and most puzzling of all, no footprints leading away from the campsite. The prairie soil was soft from recent rains, perfect for tracking. Search dogs easily followed the family's scent trails from the previous evening, to the creek where they'd collected water, to the area where the boys had played before dinner, to the spot where Lisa had taken them to look at stars. But there were no fresh trails leading away from the campsite. It was as if the family had simply evaporated while breakfast was cooking. The search effort was massive. Hundreds of volunteers combed thousands of acres of prairie grassland. Helicopters with thermal imaging equipment flew grid patterns over the entire region. Mounted search teams covered areas too rough for vehicles. They found nothing. The abandoned grain silo was searched thoroughly, though investigators couldn't imagine how a family of 4 could reach it without leaving tracks across the open prairie. The old structure was empty, except for decades of accumulated dust and the occasional bird's nest. Local Native American tribal leaders were consulted about the area's history. Elder Joseph Black Elk confirmed that the location had been used by his people for centuries, but he also shared something that made investigators uncomfortable. Our ancestors spoke of places where the earth remembers, he explained. Places where the boundary between the living world and the spirit world is thin. This land has seen much sorrow. The homesteaders who starved here, the buffalo that were slaughtered, the children who died of disease. Sometimes the earth calls people home to heal old wounds. Detective Martinez appreciated the cultural perspective, but she needed evidence, not spiritual theories. The investigation continued with scientific rigor. Lisa's ex-in-laws were questioned extensively. Relations had been strained since their son's death, with disagreements about how Lisa was raising the boys. But they had solid alibis and no apparent motive for harming their grandchildren. Financial records revealed no unusual activity. Lisa's credit cards and bank accounts hadn't been touched since the day before their camping trip. Her cell phone was found in the tent, turned off and showing no activity since the previous evening. The boy's father had died in a car accident, ruling out any custody disputes. Lisa had no romantic relationships that might complicate the investigation. By all accounts, she was a devoted mother who lived solely for her children's happiness and education. As weeks passed without leads, theories began to multiply. Maybe they'd been abducted by someone who approached their campsite after the other campers left. But there were no tire tracks from unknown vehicles, no evidence that anyone else had been in the area. Maybe they'd wandered away from camp and gotten lost in the vast prairie. But experienced search teams had covered hundreds of square miles without finding any trace. And Lisa was an experienced camper who would never leave breakfast cooking unattended. Maybe wild animals had attacked them, but there were no signs of blood, no torn clothing, no indication of any kind of struggle. The case that haunted everyone involved was the impossibility of it all. 4 people don't just disappear from an open prairie while breakfast is cooking. They can't vanish without leaving footprints across soft soil. They can't evaporate from a campsite in broad daylight. The investigation expanded to include federal agencies. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit studied the case for signs of staged disappearance or voluntary vanishing. But Lisa's psychological profile showed no indication that she would harm her children or abandon her life. Missing persons flyers with the Chen family's photos were distributed across the Mountain West. Television coverage brought national attention to the case. Psychics and amateur investigators offered their theories, but none led to credible leads. Lisa's sister Emily flew in from California to coordinate media efforts and keep the case in the public eye. Lisa would never abandon those boys, she told reporters. They were everything to her. Something terrible happened out there, and we're not giving up until we find answers. But as months turned into years, even the most dedicated investigators began to accept that the Chen family had joined the ranks of America's unsolved disappearances. The campsite was eventually released back to the landowner, who decided to close it to camping permanently. The burned pot of oatmeal was preserved as evidence, a haunting reminder of an ordinary morning that had ended in impossible circumstances. Detective Martinez retired in 2012, the Chen case still weighing on her conscience. 20 years of police work, she told her replacement, and I never found that family. It's the one case that proves there are some mysteries we're not meant to solve. Then, in the spring of 2013, tornado researcher Dr. Michael Storm made a discovery that changed everything. Dr. Storm was part of a team studying severe weather patterns across the Great Plains. Montana's vast prairies provided ideal conditions for tornado formation, and his research focused on how these storms developed and moved across open terrain. He was investigating an abandoned grain silo that had been damaged by a recent tornado when he made a discovery that defied every law of physics he knew. Floating in the exact center of the silo, about 15 feet off the ground, was a small brown stuffed animal. It hung suspended in midair with no visible means of support, turning slowly as if caught in an invisible current. Dr. Storm was a man of science who didn't believe in supernatural phenomena, but he couldn't deny what he was seeing. The stuffed animal was definitely floating, definitely defying gravity, and definitely shouldn't have been possible. He photographed the impossible sight from every angle before carefully using a long pole to retrieve the floating object. As soon as he touched it, the stuffed animal fell normally to the ground, as if whatever force had been suspending it had suddenly released its hold. The toy was a small brown bear, well-loved and showing signs of being carried everywhere by a young child. Sewn into its ear was a tag with a name written in a child's careful handwriting. Coco, Jamie Chen. Dr. Storm immediately contacted law enforcement. Within hours, Detective James Wilson, who had inherited the Chen case, was examining the impossible evidence. The stuffed animal was definitely Jamie's. Lisa's sister, Emily, confirmed it immediately. "Jamie never went anywhere without Coco," she said through tears. "He's had that bear since he was 2 years old." But how had it gotten into the grain silo? And more importantly, how had it been floating in midair? Dr. Storm's photographs were analyzed by physicists who confirmed that the images showed a clear violation of gravitational laws. The stuffed animal was suspended in empty air with no magnetic fields, no air currents, and no physical support of any kind. "This shouldn't be possible, Doctor." Patricia Kim, a quantum physicist brought in to consult on the case, explained to investigators. "Objects don't just float in midair unless there's some force acting on them. But our instruments detected no electromagnetic anomalies, no gravitational disturbances, nothing that could explain this phenomenon." The grain silo was examined exhaustively. The structure was old but solid, with no unusual properties that might explain the floating object. There were no hidden devices, no tricks, no explanation for what Dr. Storm had witnessed. But the discovery of Coco wasn't the end of the mystery. It was the beginning of something even stranger. 3 weeks after finding the floating bear, Dr. Storm returned to the grain silo to conduct additional atmospheric readings. This time, he found something else floating in exactly the same spot. A small notebook with Tyler's nature journal, written on the cover in 7-year-old handwriting. The notebook contained Tyler's observations from their camping trip, written in the careful letters of a child who was learning to record his thoughts. Day 1. We saw so many stars. Mom showed us the Big Dipper. I think Dad is watching us from up there. Day 2. We're going to explore the old buildings today. Mom says we have to be careful, but I can't wait to see inside them. But then there were entries that shouldn't have been possible. Day 3. Something happened during breakfast. We heard voices calling us from the old silo. Mom said we should go see what it was. Day 4. We're in a different place now. It looks like our camping spot, but everything is different. The grass is taller, and there are buffalo here like Mom said there used to be. Day 10. We met other families here. Kids from different times who got lost like us. They say this is where children come when they need to learn important things. The entries continued for weeks, describing experiences that seemed to occur in some alternate version of the Montana Prairie, a place where extinct buffalo roamed, where Native American tribes still lived in traditional ways, where children from different eras gathered to learn lessons about life and nature. Day 20. Mom says we're becoming teachers now. We help new kids who get scared when they first arrive. I miss our old home, but this place is important. Day 30. Marcus is teaching younger kids about being brave. Jamie is helping families stay together. I'm learning to write down everything that happened so people will understand someday. The final entry was the most disturbing. Mom says someone from our old world will find our things and know we're okay. She says love travels between worlds, and our family is helping other families learn what we learned. We're not lost. We found our purpose. Dr. Storm immediately contacted the investigation team. Tyler's journal was authenticated by handwriting experts who confirmed it was definitely written by the 7-year-old boy. But the paper and ink showed signs of aging that suggested the entries had been written over a period of months, not days. The implications were staggering. If Tyler's journal was authentic, it suggested that the Chen family hadn't been abducted or killed. They had somehow slipped into an alternate version of reality, where they were living out their lives in a place that existed alongside but separate from our world. Dr. Kim worked with a team of theoretical physicists to examine the grain silo for signs of dimensional anomalies. If parallel realities exist, she theorized, then there might be weak points where they intersect with our world. The silo could be some kind of dimensional gateway. The research revealed unusual electromagnetic readings around the old structure. Sensitive instruments detected fluctuations in local gravitational fields that occurred in regular patterns, as if the space inside the silo was somehow unstable. Local weather records showed that the area around the grain silo experienced unusual atmospheric phenomena, unexpected temperature changes, localized aurora-like lights, and electromagnetic disturbances that interfered with radio communications. But the most convincing evidence came from an unexpected source: other families. News coverage of the floating object's discovery brought forward dozens of people with similar experiences. Parents reported brief glimpses of their missing children near the grain silo. Campers described hearing the laughter of children when no children were present. Most remarkably, several families reported receiving messages from children who had disappeared in the area over the past 50 years. The messages came in various forms: notes found in impossible locations, voices heard during electrical storms, dreams that felt more real than reality. All the messages shared common themes. The children were safe, they were learning important lessons, and they were helping other lost families adapt to their new existence. Margaret Sullivan, whose 8-year-old daughter had vanished near the grain silo in 1987, received a letter that appeared overnight on her kitchen table in 2013. Mom, I'm grown up now, but still your little girl. I teach the scared kids how to be brave until their families get here. The place where we live is beautiful, and we're all together. Don't be sad. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. The investigation team faced an unprecedented situation. Scientific evidence suggested the existence of dimensional rifts, but the implications challenged everything they understood about reality. Dr. Storm continued monitoring the grain silo, documenting additional floating objects that appeared regularly. Marcus's homeschool workbook, containing advanced math problems he shouldn't have been able to solve. Lisa's teaching journal, filled with lesson plans for subjects she'd never studied. More of Jamie's belongings, each one appearing in the exact center of the silo, floating impossibly in midair before being retrieved. Each new discovery confirmed Tyler's journal entries. The Chen family was alive, but they were living in a reality parallel to ours, a place where missing children and their families gathered to learn lessons about love, courage, and the connections that bind families together across impossible distances. The grain silo became an unofficial memorial site, with families of missing children making pilgrimages to leave flowers and messages for their lost loved ones. Many reported feeling a sense of peace after visiting, as if they'd somehow made contact with children who were beyond reach, but not beyond love. Dr. Kim established a permanent research station at the site, studying the dimensional anomalies that seemed to be centered around the old structure. Her work attracted scientists from around the world, all seeking to understand how alternate realities might intersect with our own. But the most important discoveries came from the families themselves. Parents who visited the grain silo regularly began receiving their own messages from missing children. The communications came through various means: objects that appeared floating inside the silo, dreams that carried detailed information, even electronic devices that briefly picked up voices from another dimension. The messages revealed that the Chen family had become guides for other lost children, helping them adapt to their new existence and teaching them how to maintain connections with families in our reality. Lisa has become like a mother to all the children here, read one message that appeared floating in the silo. She teaches them that love doesn't end just because someone goes to a different place. The boys help other kids be brave and remember that their families are always looking for them. Emily, Lisa's sister, began visiting the grain silo monthly, bringing updates about family news and leaving letters for her missing relatives. She often reported feeling their presence, especially during sunset when the prairie wind seemed to carry whispered responses to her words. "I don't understand the science of it," Emily told a documentary filmmaker. "But I know my sister and those boys are alive somewhere, helping other families deal with loss and separation. It's exactly what Lisa would do, turn a tragedy into an opportunity to help others." The grain silo research revealed that the dimensional rift operated on predictable cycles, with objects appearing most frequently during specific weather conditions and astronomical alignments. Dr. Storm learned to anticipate when new items would manifest, allowing him to document the phenomenon more thoroughly. But the research also revealed something troubling. The rift was growing stronger. More families reported missing children in the area around the grain silo. The electromagnetic anomalies were increasing in intensity, and objects were beginning to appear floating in other locations across the Montana prairie. Dr. Kim theorized that the Chen family's presence in the alternate dimension was somehow strengthening the connection between realities. "They're becoming anchors," she explained, "maintaining the bridge between worlds so that other families can stay connected to their lost children." The implications were both beautiful and terrifying. If the dimensional rift continued to expand, more families might lose children to the alternate reality. But those same families would also have the opportunity to maintain contact with their lost loved ones in ways that had never been possible before. Local authorities struggled with how to handle the situation. Should they close the area to prevent more disappearances? Should they publicize the phenomenon to help other families of missing children? How do you regulate access to a portal between dimensions? The decision was made to establish the grain silo as a protected research site, with limited access for families of missing children and scientists studying the dimensional anomalies. The area became known as the Montana Portal, though officials preferred the more scientific designation of Dimensional Research Facility. Lisa's homeschool community organized annual gatherings at the site, sharing educational activities that honored her memory while supporting other families dealing with missing children. The events always included readings from Tyler's journal and messages from the Chen family, reminding everyone that love transcends the boundaries between realities. On the 4th anniversary of their disappearance, a new message appeared floating in the grain silo, this one written in Lisa's familiar handwriting. To everyone who remembers us with love, we are more alive than ever, surrounded by children who needed families and families who needed hope. We've learned that some people are called to serve as bridges between worlds, helping love travel across impossible distances. Thank you for understanding that we didn't leave you. We expanded to include everyone who needs the kind of family love we were blessed to share. Our classroom now includes children from many times and places, but our lesson plan is the same. Love never ends, and no one is ever truly lost. The message was signed by all 4 family members, including drawings from the boys showing their new life in the alternate dimension. Today, the Montana grain silo continues to serve as a bridge between realities, monitored by scientists and visited by families seeking connection with lost loved ones. Objects still appear floating inside the structure, bringing messages of hope and proof that the Chen family continues their work as guides for children caught between worlds. Dr. Storm still conducts research at the site, though his role has evolved from scientist to liaison between dimensions. He helps families interpret messages from their missing children and documents the ongoing phenomenon for the scientific community. The grain silo has become a symbol of hope for parents of missing children worldwide. It proves that disappearance doesn't necessarily mean death, and that love really can transcend the boundaries between different realities. And somewhere in an alternate version of the Montana Prairie, where buffalo still roam and children from different eras learn together, Lisa Chen continues homeschooling her boys while serving as a mother figure to dozens of other lost children, turning a family tragedy into a mission of love that spans multiple dimensions. The breakfast she never finished cooking has become a symbol of interrupted normalcy that transformed into something larger than any single family could imagine. The Chen family disappeared while living an ordinary morning, but they returned as proof that some purposes are bigger than individual lives, and that true educators never stop teaching, even when their classroom expands to include realities beyond our understanding. But the Chen family's influence in our world was far from finished. As word spread about the Montana portal, families from across North America began arriving to seek connection with their own missing children. The grain silo became an unexpected pilgrimage site, with parents camping nearby for weeks, hoping to receive some sign that their lost children were safe. Dr. Storm documented remarkable phenomena during these family visits. Electronic devices would malfunction in specific patterns that seemed to spell out children's names. Prairie winds would carry sounds that resembled young voices calling to their parents. Most remarkably, objects belonging to missing children from completely different cases began appearing floating inside the silo. Sarah Williams drove from Texas after her 6-year-old daughter vanished from a playground 3 years earlier. During her second night camping near the grain silo, she found her daughter's favorite hair ribbon floating in the center of the structure, along with a note written in crayon. "Mommy, I'm learning to read with other kids here." Tyler teaches us about nature, and Marcus shows us how to be brave. "Don't cry for me. I'm helping babies who miss their mommies feel better." The note was authenticated as being written by Sarah's daughter, though the girl had barely known her letters when she disappeared. Dr. Kim's research revealed that the dimensional rift was creating what she termed compassion cascades, waves of healing energy that seemed to emanate from the Chen family's work in the alternate dimension. Families who visited the grain silo reported dramatic improvements in their ability to cope with loss and find meaning in tragedy. The Chen family has become a healing force that operates across dimensional boundaries, Doctor," Kim explained to a gathering of grief counselors and physicists. "Their educational mission has evolved into something that helps families process loss in ways we never thought possible." Local authorities established the Chen Family Foundation, dedicated to supporting families of missing children and funding research into dimensional phenomena. The foundation's headquarters was built near the grain silo, creating a permanent support center for parents seeking connection with lost children. The foundation's work attracted international attention. Researchers from universities worldwide came to study the portal, while families from dozens of countries made pilgrimages to the site. The grain silo became a symbol of hope that transcended cultural and linguistic barriers. But perhaps the most remarkable development was the emergence of what locals called teaching echoes. Visitors to the grain silo began reporting educational experiences that seemed to come directly from Lisa's ongoing homeschool activities in the alternate dimension. Children who visited the site with their families would suddenly understand complex concepts about nature, history, and science that they'd never been taught. 8-year-old Michael Torres, whose family visited the grain silo during a camping trip, returned home with detailed knowledge about prairie ecosystems that amazed his teachers. "I dreamed about a nice lady who showed me how buffalo and grass worked together," he explained. "She said her name was Mrs. Chen, and that teaching helps kids everywhere, even in different worlds." Adult visitors reported similar experiences. Parents struggling with homeschool curricula would leave the grain silo with innovative teaching ideas that seemed to come from nowhere. Educators facing challenging students would find new approaches that worked with remarkable effectiveness. The phenomenon suggested that Lisa's educational expertise was somehow radiating across dimensional boundaries, helping teachers and parents in our reality improve their ability to nurture and educate children. Dr. Storm established the Chen Educational Research Institute, documenting how exposure to the dimensional rift seemed to enhance people's natural teaching abilities. The research revealed measurable improvements in empathy, patience, and creative problem-solving among visitors to the site. "Lisa Chen has become more than a missing person, Doctor," Storm explained to education conferences worldwide. "She's become a living symbol of how love for children and commitment to education can transcend any limitation, even death itself." The grain silo continues to serve as a bridge between realities, bringing comfort to grieving families while advancing our understanding of loves to transcend dimensional boundaries. Monthly gatherings at the site have become celebration events where families share updates about their lives and receive ongoing support from the Chen family's presence in the alternate dimension. Emily still visits regularly, now serving as an unofficial guide for other families seeking connection with missing loved ones. "Lisa always said that good teachers never stop teaching," she tells newcomers. "She just found a way to expand her classroom to include children who need her most." Recent messages from the alternate dimension suggest that the Chen family has established a complete educational community, with dozens of missing children learning together under Lisa's guidance while maintaining connections to families in our reality. On quiet evenings, when the prairie wind moves through the grain silo just right, visitors report hearing the sounds of children at play, laughter that carries across impossible distances, and the gentle voice of a teacher helping young minds discover the wonders of learning. The Chen family vanished during an ordinary homeschool camping trip, but they returned as eternal educators, proving that some people are destined to teach not just in one reality, but across all dimensions where children need guidance, love, and the unshakable belief that learning never ends. Their floating stuffed animal was just the beginning of a story that continues to unfold, showing that true education transcends every boundary we thought defined human existence.